The year is 2025 and the trade world is in chaos. It all started when US President Donald Trump, back in the White House after a shock election victory, decided to slap a hefty 25% tariff on imported steel and aluminum. That's right, folks, the man who loves tariffs more than his own reflection decided to hit the global economy with a curveball. Now you might be thinking, Trevor, why would he do that? Well, according to Trump, it was all about protecting American jobs and industries. He claimed that other countries were flooding the US with cheap steel and aluminum, hurting American workers. But let's be real, this was classic Trump throwing a tantrum and hoping for the best. Of course, this move didn't go down too well with the rest of the world. Europe in particular wasn't about to take this lying down. They saw it for what it was, a blatant attempt to protect American industries at the expense of everyone else. And they weren't going to let Trump get away with it. So get ready for a wild ride because this trade war is about to get messy. France, never one to back down from a fight, immediately jumped into the ring. Leading the charge was French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, a man who knows a thing or two about standing up to bullies. Barrot, with the full support of the European Union, declared that France would not be bullied by Trump's protectionist policies. They weren't messing around, folks. France, along with the EU, hit back with countermeasures of their own. These included tariffs on American goods targeting iconic products like Harley-Davidson motorcycles, Kentucky bourbon, and Levi's jeans. Ouch! That's gotta hurt, even for a tough guy like Trump. The message was clear. You want to play dirty? Two can play at that game. France wasn't just reacting to the tariffs themselves, they were fighting against the principle of the whole thing. They argued that Trump's actions violated international trade rules and threatened the entire global trading system. They were basically saying, hey Trump, we built this house together and we're not going to let you burn it down just because you're having a tantrum. This wasn't just about economics, it was about standing up for what's right. And France, along with the EU, was ready to take Trump to the mat over it. One of the industries caught in the crossfire of this trade war was the automotive sector. And let me tell you folks, it was a real car crash. The tariffs, like a rogue mechanic, started messing with the delicate machinery of the global auto industry. See, car manufacturing is a global affair. Parts are made in one country, shipped to another for assembly, and then sold all over the world. But Trump's tariffs threw a wrench in the works. Suddenly, the cost of imported steel and aluminum shot up, making it more expensive to build cars in the US. This put European car makers, particularly those in France and Germany, in a tight spot. They had to decide whether to eat the increased costs, which would hurt their profits, or raise prices, which could make their cars less competitive. It was a lose-lose situation. And let's not forget about the supply chain disruptions. With tariffs messing with the flow of goods, companies had to scramble to find alternative sources for their materials. It was like trying to assemble a car with parts from different junkyards, a logistical nightmare. This trade war was turning the auto industry into a demolition derby, with companies from all over the world getting caught in the wreckage. As if the trade war wasn't bad enough on its own, it also poured gasoline on some already smoldering issues in the auto industry. You see, car makers were already grappling with rising production costs, even before Trump decided to play tariff roulette. The transition to electric vehicles was also adding to the pressure. Developing and producing EVs requires significant investment, and the tariffs just made it that much harder for companies to make that shift. It was like trying to run a marathon while carrying a sack of potatoes. Not easy. And then there were the semiconductor shortages. These tiny chips, essential for modern cars, were already in short supply, and the trade war only made things worse. It was like trying to bake a cake without enough eggs, a recipe for disaster. Trump's tariffs weren't just a bump in the road for the auto industry, they were a full-blown roadblock. They exacerbated existing problems and made it even harder for the industry to navigate the already bumpy road ahead. France looks east, bonjour, China. With the trade war raging and the US becoming an unreliable partner, France decided to explore other options. They turned their attention eastward, to the rising economic powerhouse of China. And let me tell you folks, it was a match made in trade heaven. France saw an opportunity to reduce its reliance on the US and gain access to a massive and growing market. China, on the other hand, was eager to welcome French investment and expertise, particularly in sectors like aviation, agriculture, and you guessed it, automotive technology. The two countries wasted no time in inking deals. They signed agreements on everything from building new Airbus factories in China to exporting French wine and cheese to Chinese consumers. But the real prize was in electric vehicle technology. France, with its expertise in battery technology, saw a chance to become a major player in the Chinese EV market, which was growing faster than bamboo after a rainstorm. Chinese companies, in turn, were eager to tap into French know-how to boost their own EV production. It was a win-win situation. The EU stands united, strength in numbers against trade wars. Now, France wasn't fighting this trade war alone. They had the full backing of the European Union, and the EU was ready to flex its collective muscle. French President Emmanuel Macron, a man who knows a thing or two about uniting a continent, pushed for a coordinated response to Trump's tariffs. The EU, with its 27 member states, represented a formidable economic bloc. They had the power to impose significant tariffs on US goods, potentially hurting American businesses and workers. And they weren't afraid to use it. But the EU's power went beyond just tariffs. They also had a strong legal framework and a commitment to multilateralism. They could challenge Trump's actions at the World Trade Organization, WTO, and rally other countries to their cause. It was like bringing a whole legal team to a schoolyard brawl. The message was clear. You want to pick a fight with one of us? You're picking a fight with all of us. And trust me, folks, the EU is not an opponent you want to underestimate. Beyond cars and steel, the ripple effect of a trade war. The trade war wasn't just about cars and steel, it had a ripple effect, spreading outwards and impacting other industries around the world. Think of it like throwing a rock into a pond. The initial splash might be small, but the ripples can spread far and wide. For example, the French wine and spirits industry, known for its champagne and cognac, felt the sting of the trade war. The US market, a major destination for French exports, became more challenging as tariffs loomed and consumer confidence waned. It was like trying to sell ice to Eskimos, not an easy task. Other European industries, from aerospace to luxury goods, also faced headwinds. Major corporations already grappling with a slowing global economy had to contend with the added uncertainty and costs brought on by the trade war. It was like trying to run a business in the middle of a hurricane, chaotic and unpredictable. The trade war highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy. When two economic giants like the US and the EU start throwing punches, everyone gets caught in the crossfire. The endgame: can we talk, or will this get ugly? So, what's next for this trade war? Will it escalate into a full-blown economic conflict, or can cooler heads prevail? The situation remained fluid, folks, like a lava lamp on a roller coaster. Negotiations between the US and the EU were ongoing, but progress was slow. Neither side wanted to appear weak, and both were digging in their heels on key issues. It was like a game of chicken, with the global economy hanging in the balance. Adding to the complexity was the increasingly tense relationship between the US and China. The two superpowers were locked in their own trade war, and the possibility of armed conflict, while still remote, was no longer unthinkable. It was like the world had become a giant game of Risk, with the stakes higher than ever before. The outcome of these trade wars would have profound consequences for the global economy and the future of international relations. Would we see a return to cooperation and multilateralism, or would we descend into a world of protectionism and conflict? Only time would tell. Stay tuned, folks, because this roller coaster ride is far from over.